He caught her arrow midair. Now she must marry him, with no turning back. The sun had just started its climb over the small village, painting the fields with warm, golden light. Birds chirped lazily from the trees, and the air carried the faint scent of wildflowers mixed with the earthy smell of morning dew. In the middle of the open field, a young woman stood with a bow in her hands. Her name was Amina, and she was known throughout the village for her exceptional skill in archery. But more than that, she was known for her strong spirit and refusal to follow the rules that everyone else seemed to accept without question. Every morning, Amina would come to this secluded part of the field to practice her shots. The villagers often whispered about her determination, some with admiration and some with disapproval. She was not like other young women in the village who spent their days helping with chores or preparing for marriage. Amina had dreams and ambitions that stretched far beyond the small homes and dirt roads of the village. She wanted to master her skill, prove herself, and perhaps one day travel beyond the mountains that enclosed her home. This morning was no different. She pulled an arrow from her quiver, knocked it to her bowstring, and aimed carefully at a target placed far ahead. Her eyes were steady, her hands steady, her breath even. When she released the arrow, it whistled through the air and struck the bullseye dead center. Amina allowed herself a small smile. She had been practicing for months to perfect this particular shot. But her quiet morning was about to be interrupted in a way no one in the village could have expected. A caravan of people had entered the village the previous evening, led by a young nobleman named Faison. He was tall, strong, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. Unlike most visitors, he did not arrive with loud fanfare or servants. He had simply entered the village and observed quietly. Many villagers were already talking about him, speculating about his wealth and influence. But few knew that he had come to the village not just to see the sights, but to find stories of courage and skill, stories like Amina's. As Amina drew another arrow, preparing to test herself with an even more difficult shot, she felt a strange sensation. It was as if the air itself had shifted, and suddenly she noticed a figure standing at the edge of the field. She frowned but did not lower her bow. Faison watched her calmly, his eyes never leaving her movements. There was something unusual about the way he stood, confident, yet completely unthreatening. Amina released her arrow and it sped toward the target, but before it could strike, something impossible happened. Faison reached out, catching the arrow midair with one hand, as if it were no more difficult than holding a cup of water. The villagers gasped. Some stumbled backward in shock. Others whispered to each other, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Amina froze, her heart pounding in her chest. No one had ever come close to such a feat, and certainly no one had ever done it in front of the whole village. How?" she stammered, unable to form a proper question. Faison's eyes met hers, calm, steady, unreadable. "Your aim is remarkable," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "But it seems even your best shot can be intercepted." Amina's cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. Who was this man to challenge her, to embarrass her in front of everyone? She took a step forward, gripping her bow tighter, trying to regain control of the situation. "Who are you to stand here and take my arrow?" she demanded. "This is my field, my practice. You have no right to interfere." Faison smiled faintly, as if amused by her fire. "I am Faison," he replied simply, "and I do not intend to harm you. I only wish to see the truth of what the stories say. You are indeed skilled." The villagers murmured, their excitement growing. Some began to look at Amina differently, with a mixture of awe and fear. There were whispers that this was an omen. In their small village, unusual events were often seen as signs from the gods, and catching an arrow mid-flight, that was a miracle or a threat. Amina, however, felt none of the awe. She felt anger, confusion, and a deep sense of injustice. How dare this stranger stand there, seemingly controlling her fate with nothing but his strength? She took another arrow from her quiver, knocking it with deliberate care. "If you want to test my skill," she said, "then let us do it properly, but do not think you can frighten me into obedience." Phazon nodded slightly. "I do not wish to frighten you," he said, "but there is something you must understand. In our village traditions, catching an arrow in flight can signify a bond. It is said that the one who catches another's arrow may claim a connection, one that requires acknowledgement and sometimes marriage." The word struck Amina like a lightning bolt. Her eyes widened. "Marriage? Are you serious? You think that because you caught my arrow I am now bound to you?" Phazon's expression did not change. "According to tradition, yes, but that is for you and the village to decide. I can only act within the rules that have been followed for generations." The villagers around them had stopped talking, holding their breath. Some were nodding gravely, as if the nobleman had just confirmed something they had long suspected. Others were whispering warnings to Amina, telling her to obey or face disgrace. Amina's mind raced. She felt trapped between her desire for independence and the weight of the village's expectations. She could run, she thought, but where? The village was surrounded by mountains and forests, and no one would risk helping her. She could refuse, but that would mean challenging not just Phazon but the entire community. She lowered her bow slowly, her hands trembling. I cannot believe this," she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "How can a single act, an arrow, dictate the rest of my life?" Phazon took a careful step forward, keeping his hands visible. "It does not have to dictate your life," he said gently. "It only opens a path that has always existed. How you walk it is your choice." Amina looked at him skeptically. There was something in his tone that was different from the rest of the village elders. He did not seem cruel or eager to control her. But she could not ignore the power he displayed, the way he had caught her arrow so effortlessly. The thought that she might have no real choice at all gnawed at her, making her stomach twist. The morning passed slowly. The villagers lingered, watching the exchange between the young woman and the nobleman. Some offered advice, some watched silently, but all understood that something unprecedented was happening. Amina felt eyes on her from every corner of the village. She could feel the weight of expectation pressing down, yet in her heart, a small flame of determination refused to die. She spent the rest of the morning practicing her shots, each arrow flying straighter and truer than the last. With every release, she reminded herself of her skill, her independence, and her refusal to be subdued. Yet, even as she demonstrated her mastery, Phazon remained there, watching quietly, catching every arrow she released with the same calm precision. By midday, Amina realized that this encounter had changed everything. The arrow, a simple instrument of her skill, had become a symbol of fate, of tradition, and of a bond she had not asked for. She could not yet see how she would navigate the challenges ahead, but she knew one thing: she would not give up easily. The villagers began to leave slowly, some still whispering about what they had witnessed. Amina packed up her bows and arrows, her mind racing with questions and fears. Phazon approached her one last time before turning away. "Think carefully," he said. "This is not just about tradition or skill. It is about honor, courage, and the choices we make when we are tested." Amina watched him go, her heart pounding. She had faced many challenges before, but nothing like this. She knew that her life was about to change forever. Whether it would be for better or worse, she could not yet tell. All she knew was that she would need every ounce of her courage, skill, and cleverness to face what was coming. And as she walked back toward her home, the weight of the arrow, still caught in her memory, reminded her that some encounters leave marks that cannot easily be erased. The day after the incident with the arrow, the village seemed different to Amina. The air felt heavier, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. People glanced at her as she walked through the dirt paths, some with curiosity, others with judgment. Mothers held their children closer, elders nodded gravely, and even her friends whispered in hushed tones. It was as if the simple act of her arrow being caught had shifted the balance of her life. Amina tried to keep her head high, refusing to let the whispers shake her. But inside, her heart was a storm of confusion and worry. She had always believed in her skill, her independence, and her ability to make her own choices. Yet now, the villagers' eyes seemed to measure her worth by a single moment, a moment she had not even understood the significance of until it had passed. Her family felt the change too. That morning, her mother called her into the small kitchen where the sun barely touched the earthen floor. The smell of freshly baked bread and sweet tea usually brought comfort, but today, even those familiar scents could not calm the tension. "Amina," her mother began, her voice trembling slightly, "people are talking about what happened yesterday and what Faison said." She paused, wringing her hands. "The elders believe you are bound by tradition. They think you must consider marriage with him." Amina's stomach sank. She had expected some reaction, but the weight of her mother's words was heavier than she imagined. "Mother, it is not that simple," she said, her voice firm but low. "I did not give him anything. I do not belong to him, and I will not be forced into marriage. I am not like the other girls who accept without question." Her mother sighed, her eyes filled with worry. "I know, Amina, I know you are strong and brave, but you must understand the village has its ways. People respect tradition. If you refuse, you will face more than whispers. You could be shunned or worse. I do not want that for you." Amina looked away, gripping her hands together to stop them from shaking. She loved her family and respected their concern, but the idea of being pressured into a life she did not choose made her feel trapped. "Then I will find a way to show them I have a choice," she said softly, more to herself than to her mother. "I will prove that I am not just a tradition to be followed." By mid-morning, news of Faison's claim had spread throughout the village. People gathered in the central square, debating and discussing what should be done. Some believed that tradition must be followed at all costs, while others quietly admired Amina's courage and skill. The elders, a group of serious men and women respected for their wisdom, called a meeting to decide the matter. Amina knew she would have to attend. She walked into the square with her head held high, but inside, her nerves trembled. Faison was already there, standing tall among the elders. Unlike the villagers, he did not seem burdened by worry or excitement. His calm presence was both reassuring and unnerving. The meeting began, and the village elders spoke at length. They reminded everyone of the traditions that had been followed for generations. "When an arrow is caught in flight," one elder explained, "it symbolizes a bond. The one who catches the arrow shows strength, skill, and intent. It is believed that the other party must honor this action. The girl now stands before the village to honor that bond." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, while others shifted uneasily. Amina's heart raced. She felt the walls closing in, the weight of expectation pressing down on her. She opened her mouth to protest, but the elders continued. One of the older women spoke next, her voice soft but firm. "We must not forget that Amina is a skilled archer, a young woman of courage and intelligence. We respect her abilities, but we must also respect our ways. She has a choice, yes, but that choice must be made within the traditions of our village." Amina felt a mixture of relief and frustration. She had a choice, yet the parameters were tightly controlled by the very traditions she had always resisted. She looked at Faison, who met her gaze steadily. There was no cruelty in his eyes, only an expectation that she would understand the significance of what had happened. After the meeting, she walked back toward her home, feeling a mix of determination and dread. She needed time to think, to understand her next steps. As she passed the fields where she practiced archery, she noticed the bow and arrows leaning against a tree. They had always been her companions, her tools, her way of asserting control in a world that often tried to limit her. Today, they seemed to hold a different weight, symbols of a challenge she could not ignore. That evening, Phazon came to visit her family home. He did not come with guards or fanfare, only himself and a quiet dignity. Amina's mother greeted him politely but with evident concern. Phazon bowed slightly. "I hope I am not intruding," he said. "I wish to speak with Amina privately if she will allow it." Amina felt a surge of anxiety but nodded. She followed him outside to the garden, where the evening sun cast long shadows across the ground. The air was still, filled with the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. "Do you understand why I am here?" Phazon asked, his voice calm. Amina took a deep breath. "Yes, you caught my arrow and now tradition says I must honor that. But I do not understand why this should define my life." Phazon nodded. "I do not wish to force you. I only wish to show you that strength and skill are respected here, and that the choice you make matters. I admire your courage and I respect your abilities. But the village, the traditions, they are powerful forces. They do not bend easily." Amina felt her heart tighten. She did not want to submit, but she could see the truth in his words. Tradition was a weight she could not lift alone. Yet she also saw a hint of something different in Phazon, a willingness to understand her, to respect her choices if she could assert them. "I will not be forced," she said firmly, "but I will not run away either. I will find a way to navigate this on my terms." Phazon's lips curved slightly into a small smile. "I expected nothing less. Courage suits you well, Amina. That is why I caught your arrow, not to control you, but to see if your spirit was as strong as your aim. And it is." For the first time since the incident, Amina felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this challenge was not only about tradition or obligation, but about showing her true strength. She realized that the days ahead would be filled with tests of skill, of patience, and of character. But she also knew that she had allies in unexpected places, including Phazon, who seemed to understand the balance between power and respect. Over the next few days, Amina prepared herself. She practiced archery more intensely than ever, not just to prove her skill, but to remind herself that she still controlled her life. Each arrow she released into the target was a statement of defiance and determination. She would not be subdued by fear, by whispers, or by tradition alone. The villagers watched her progress, some with admiration, others with skepticism. They began to see that Amina was not a girl to be easily controlled, and whispers of respect began to mingle with their gossip. Phazon observed from a distance, occasionally offering guidance or encouragement, but never taking over. His presence was steady, a reminder that the challenge was not about domination, but about proving one's courage and integrity. Amina also began to notice small acts of kindness from unexpected villagers, people who quietly supported her, who left small gifts of encouragement, or who whispered words of advice. She realized that while tradition could be rigid, human hearts were capable of understanding and change. As the days passed, Amina's resolve grew stronger. She knew that she could not avoid the confrontation that was coming, but she also knew that she was not powerless. With every arrow, every decision, she prepared herself for the moment when she would have to face the village, Phazon, and the weight of tradition head-on. And in the quiet moments of the evening, when the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned a soft shade of orange, Amina would practice alone in the fields, imagining the path ahead. She knew that challenges awaited her, but she also knew that courage, skill, and determination could carve a path where none seemed possible. By the end of the week, the village had settled into a tense anticipation. Everyone knew that a decision would soon be made, one that could change Amina's life forever. But she felt ready. She had faced doubt, fear, and judgment, and she had emerged stronger. Whatever lay ahead, she would meet it with her bow in hand and her spirit unbroken. And as night fell, Amina lay in her small room, listening to the sounds of the village, thinking of arrows, traditions, and courage. She realized that this was only the beginning. The challenge had been set, and she was determined to meet it, not as a girl bound by expectation, but as a young woman claiming her own destiny. The morning of the tournament arrived with an unusual energy in the village. Birds chirped nervously as if sensing the tension, and the air felt thick with anticipation. Amina stood at the edge of the field, her bow in hand, her arrows neatly arranged in her quiver. Today was not just any practice. Today she would face a challenge that could define her future. The village elders had announced that a contest would be held to test her skill. If she proved herself, they would have to respect her decision regarding Faison. If not, the consequences were clear. Amina's heart beat fast, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. She had practiced tirelessly over the past week, not just for the competition, but for her life. Each arrow she had released had been a small victory against doubt, a reminder that she was capable of controlling her own destiny. Yet standing here, seeing the crowd gathering, she realized that skill alone would not be enough. She would need courage, quick thinking, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. The villagers assembled in the square, filling the space with murmurs and whispered bets. Some cheered quietly for Amina, proud of her courage. Others doubted her, expecting her to fail under pressure. Faison stood near the elders, watching with his usual calm expression, his eyes fixed on her every movement. There was no trace of arrogance in his gaze, only a quiet observation that made Amina feel both challenged and strangely supported. The contest began with simple tasks. Amina was asked to hit targets at increasing distances, with varying difficulty. The first arrows she released landed close to the center of each target, earning nods of approval from some villagers and skeptical looks from others. With each shot, she felt more in control, more confident in her ability to face whatever came next. But the elders were not satisfied with simple demonstrations of skill. They introduced challenges that required precision under unusual conditions. The wind was directed across the field with large fans, making arrows sway unpredictably. Targets were placed on uneven surfaces, some partially hidden behind obstacles. Amina's hands shook slightly as she prepared her first tricky shot, but she took a deep breath, focusing her mind and steadying her aim. She released the arrow and it flew true, striking the target dead center. A collective murmur ran through the crowd. Amina allowed herself a brief smile, but there was no time to celebrate. The next challenges demanded even more, hitting moving targets, shooting from difficult angles, and timing shots with precision. Each task tested not just her skill, but her composure, focus, and courage. Faison watched silently, occasionally nodding in approval when her shots were perfect. Amina noticed his presence, and for a moment she wondered if he understood the pressure she felt, but she quickly pushed the thought aside. This contest was not about him. It was about her choices, and proving to the village that she could stand on her own. As the contest progressed, fatigue began to set in. Her arms ached from drawing the bow repeatedly, her eyes strained from focusing on distant targets, and her heart raced from the constant anticipation. Yet she refused to falter. Each arrow she released was a statement, that she would not be intimidated, that she would not surrender to fear or expectation. The final challenge was the most difficult of all. The elders placed a small, moving target at an unusually long distance. The target moved unpredictably, weaving left and right, and the wind had picked up, adding another layer of complexity. The crowd held its breath as Amina prepared her final arrow. Every pair of eyes in the village square was on her, some filled with hope, some with doubt, and some with quiet awe. Amina closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. She remembered the advice her father had once given her: focus on the target, not the noise around you. Let your hands and heart guide your arrow together. She opened her eyes, drew her bow, and let the arrow fly. Time seemed to slow as the arrow cut through the air, swaying slightly with the wind. It struck the moving target perfectly, earning gasps of astonishment from the crowd. For a moment there was complete silence. Then the villagers erupted into applause, some cheering loudly, others nodding in grudging respect. Even the elders, who had been stern and skeptical throughout, acknowledged her victory with approving gestures. Amina's chest heaved as she lowered her bow, a sense of triumph and relief washing over her. She had done it. She had proven her skill, her courage, and her determination. But there was still one question lingering in her mind. How would Phazon respond? He stepped forward from the crowd, his expression unreadable at first. Then a small smile appeared on his lips. "Your skill is remarkable, Amina," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "You have proven more than just ability with a bow. You have shown courage, focus, and integrity. I respect that greatly." Amina felt a mixture of pride and caution. Respect from Phazon was not what she feared. It was the weight of tradition and the village's expectations that still pressed down on her. "Thank you," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "But this does not change everything. I am still my own person and I will decide my future." Phazon nodded slowly. "I understand, and I admire that more than you realize. Today, you have shown the village that strength and skill are worthy of respect. Your choices matter, and no tradition should take that away." The elders approached her cautiously, acknowledging her victory. "Amina," one of the older men said, "you have proven yourself beyond question. The village recognizes your skill and courage. You may choose your path as tradition allows." The words were both comforting and heavy. Amina realized that the contest had given her leverage, but the challenge was far from over. She had proven her ability, yet she would still have to navigate the complex expectations of Phazon, the elders, and the villagers. But for the first time, she felt a sense of control. She was no longer simply reacting to events around her, she was shaping them. Phazon stayed nearby, observing her with interest. "You handled yourself admirably," he said. "Many would have faltered under this pressure. You did not." Amina looked at him, sensing a change in their dynamic. The man who had once caught her arrow effortlessly now seemed genuinely impressed and respectful. She realized that while tradition had initially put her at a disadvantage, her courage and skill had created a space where she could negotiate her own destiny. As the sun climbed higher, the villagers began to disperse, leaving Amina and Phazon standing in the field. The air was warm, the sky clear, and for the first time in days, Amina felt a sense of peace. She had faced the challenge, proven herself, and earned respect, not through submission but through determination and skill. Phazon spoke again, his voice quiet but sincere. "You have shown that strength and courage can change the way traditions are interpreted. I hope you know that I do not seek to control you. I only wish to understand and support you, if you will allow it." Amina considered his words carefully. She was still wary, still cautious, but she also sensed an opportunity. This was not just about skill with a bow, it was about forging a relationship based on respect and mutual understanding. "I will not be controlled," she said firmly. "But I am willing to listen, to communicate, and to see what is possible." Phazon nodded, a small, approving smile on his face. "That is all I ask. True partnership requires understanding, not dominance. You have shown both strength and wisdom today." As Amina packed her bow and arrows, she felt a new sense of purpose. The contest had not only tested her skills but also her spirit. She had faced fear, judgment, and the weight of expectation, and she had emerged stronger. She realized that the path ahead would still be challenging, but she no longer felt powerless. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Amina walked home with a steady stride. The villagers she passed greeted her with newfound respect. Some smiled quietly, others offered words of encouragement. Even the younger children, who had watched the contest with wide eyes, waved at her proudly. Amina knew that the journey was far from over. The challenges of tradition, village expectations, and Phazon's unusual claim still lay ahead. But she also knew that she had the skill, courage, and determination to face whatever came next. She had proven herself to the village, to Phazon, and most importantly, to herself. And as she lay down that night, thinking of arrows, courage, and the trials ahead, she felt a quiet confidence growing within her. The contest had been a turning point. She had faced the impossible and had emerged victorious, not because of luck, but because of her determination and skill. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and new opportunities. But for tonight, Amina allowed herself to rest, knowing that she had taken the first step in shaping her own destiny. She had faced the trial and she had won. And in that victory, she had discovered a strength that no tradition, no expectation, and no obstacle could take away from her. The days after the tournament were filled with whispers, glances, and quiet deliberation. Amina had proven herself in skill and courage, yet the victory did not end the tension surrounding her. The village had witnessed her triumph, but tradition and expectation still loomed large. She had shown her strength, yet she could not escape the reality that her future, whether she liked it or not, now involved Phazon. Amina spent the mornings in her small garden, practicing archery to keep her focus and control her restless thoughts. Each arrow she released seemed to carry the weight of the decision she had yet to make. She could feel the eyes of the village watching, not openly, but in quiet, judgmental ways that made every moment of movement feel heavy. She loved her independence, and the thought of surrendering it, even partially, made her stomach twist. Her mother approached her one morning, the sunlight catching the worry in her eyes. "Amina," she said softly, "I know you have proven yourself. You have shown skill, courage, and wisdom beyond your years, but the elders and the village, they expect something more now. You must consider what Phazon wants and what is expected of you." Amina looked away, her fingers tightening around the bow. "Mother, I have done everything to show that I am not a child to be controlled. I will not be forced, but I also see that I cannot ignore what others expect. I must find a way to balance my independence with their demands." Her mother nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I only want what is best for you, Amina. You are brave, and I know your heart is strong. But sometimes the hardest battles are not against others, but against the pressures we cannot see." The thought lingered in Amina's mind. She knew she had the strength to win contests, to defy fear and to face physical challenges, but this was different. Now the challenge was emotional, personal, and intertwined with the expectations of the village in Phazon. She could not aim an arrow at a target and force the answer. She had to find a way to navigate people, feelings, and traditions simultaneously. One afternoon, Phazon approached the garden while she practiced. He did not come with guards or ceremony, only himself, his calm presence a contrast to the storm inside her. Amina watched him silently for a moment, then lowered her bow slightly. "You are persistent," he said quietly, a faint smile on his lips. "I respect that. And I understand why. You have proven more than skill. You have proven strength, courage, and an unwillingness to be subdued." Amina's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what about you?" she asked. "Do you believe tradition gives you the right to decide for me? Or are you here simply to watch me struggle?" Phazon shook his head. "Neither. I do not wish to control you. I only wish to understand you and to offer what I can to support your choices. I realize the tradition seems rigid, but it is not meant to bind you against your will. It is meant to show that courage and skill are recognized, and you have more than enough of both." Amina studied him carefully. His words were gentle, honest, and unlike anyone she had encountered. She sensed no manipulation, no pressure, only a willingness to meet her where she was. Yet she could not ignore the fact that his claim and the village's expectations still existed. "I do not want to give up my freedom," she said, her voice firm. "But I also do not want to cause shame or conflict in the village. I am not sure how to navigate this without losing myself." Phazon nodded slowly. "Then we navigate it together, not as master and servant, but as partners. I cannot promise you that it will be simple or that the village will accept every choice you make, but I can promise respect and the willingness to listen." His words struck Amina in a way she had not anticipated. She had expected a stern, commanding presence, someone who would demand obedience. Instead, she found someone willing to acknowledge her strength and work with her rather than against her. It did not remove the challenge ahead, but it offered a glimmer of hope. Over the next few days, Amina and Faison spoke often, mostly in quiet moments away from the crowd. They discussed her fears, her dreams, and the pressures of tradition. Faison shared his own struggles, explaining that he too had felt the weight of expectation and had often questioned what it meant to honor tradition without losing himself. Amina began to notice a softer side of him, his patience, his willingness to consider perspectives beyond his own, and his quiet encouragement. She realized that while the village and its customs were a challenge, Faison could become an ally, someone who respected her independence while navigating the realities of their situation together. Yet the decision she faced was not simple. She could not ignore the expectations of the village elders or the whispers that followed her through the streets. Some villagers openly questioned whether she would comply, while others admired her courage but feared the consequences of defying tradition. Every day was a balancing act between her personal desires and the pressures that surrounded her. One evening, she met with the village elders to discuss the path forward. They were stern, as always, but there was a noticeable respect in their eyes after the tournament. "Amina," one elder began, "you have proven yourself through skill, courage, and wisdom. You have faced every challenge with honor, yet the choice before you is still yours. We will not force you, but we must see that tradition is respected in the process." Amina nodded. "I understand. I will make my decision carefully, with respect for the village, but also for myself. I will not give up my independence, but I will consider the path that allows me to navigate both respect and freedom." The elders murmured their approval. They recognized her determination and understood that she had earned a measure of authority over her own future. Yet they also reminded her that the decision would have consequences, and that she would need to be strong, patient, and wise. As she walked home that evening, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Amina felt a mix of relief and tension. She had gained respect and a chance to choose, but the path forward was still unclear. Faison had proven himself respectful, yet the societal pressures and traditions remained. Later that night, she and Faison met once more in the quiet garden. "You have earned more than skill," he said softly. "You have earned the ability to choose. That is rare. I will not take that from you. Whatever you decide, I will respect it." Amina looked at him, feeling a mix of wariness and trust. "I need time," she admitted. "Time to understand my own heart and to see how I can navigate the expectations of others without losing myself." Faison nodded. "Then take all the time you need. Strength is not just in skill, it is in understanding oneself and making decisions with courage." In that moment, Amina felt a sense of clarity. She realized that the challenge ahead was not just about tradition, or about Faison, or even about the village. It was about her own courage, her ability to stand firm in her choices, and her willingness to navigate a path that honored both her independence and the realities around her. Over the next days, Amina reflected deeply. She practiced archery, trained her mind for patience, and considered her feelings toward Faison. She realized that respect, trust, and partnership could exist even within the constraints of tradition. She could choose a path that honored both herself and the village, but it would require careful thought, clear boundaries, and unwavering courage. When she finally made her decision, it was with confidence. She approached Faison in the morning, her bow at her side and her heart steady. "I have thought about the path ahead," she said, "and I am ready to move forward, but only in a way that allows me to remain true to myself. I will not give up my independence, but I am willing to explore a partnership built on respect, courage, and understanding." Faison's eyes softened, and a smile appeared on his face. That is all I could ever hope for. Together, we will navigate this path, respecting each other, honoring tradition when it matters, and never losing sight of who we are. For the first time in weeks, Amina felt a sense of calm. The challenge was not over, and the journey ahead would still have trials, but she had found a balance between heart, courage, and tradition. She knew that respect, communication, and trust would guide her, and that she had the strength to face whatever came next. And as the sun rose that day, casting light across the village, Amina stood tall, her bow ready, her spirit unbroken, and her heart determined. She had faced fear, expectation, and uncertainty, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for the final steps of her journey. The morning of the wedding arrived with a quiet, almost magical calm. The village was alive with activity, yet there was a sense of anticipation that hung in the air like mist over the fields. Amina stood in her small home, adjusting the simple but elegant clothes chosen for her heart beating fast with a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and determination. She had faced countless challenges over the past weeks, skill contests, traditions, expectations, and difficult conversations, and now she was about to face one of the most important moments of her life. Her mother entered the room, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted Amina's hair. "You have grown so much, my daughter," she said softly. "Your courage, your skill, your wisdom, it will guide you through today. Remember, this day is not just about tradition. It is about who you are and the choices you make." Amina nodded, feeling the weight of her mother's words. She had learned that courage was not just about hitting a target or standing up to others. Courage was about understanding one's heart, making decisions with clarity, and facing the consequences without fear. Today, she would need all of that courage. Outside, the villagers were gathering. They had seen Amina's skill, her courage, and her determination. Many whispered words of respect, some with pride, others with curiosity. The elders had agreed that the marriage would proceed, but they had also made it clear that Amina's choices and boundaries would be respected. The balance of tradition and personal freedom would be tested, and everyone knew that the eyes of the village were upon her. Faison arrived quietly, without pomp or unnecessary ceremony. He was dressed in simple yet dignified clothes, his presence calm and reassuring. When he saw Amina, his eyes softened with a warmth that made her heart beat faster. There was no arrogance in his gaze, only respect and a quiet admiration. "You are ready," he said gently, his voice carrying a sense of steadiness. "You have faced everything with courage. Today, we step into a new chapter together, but I will not ask you to give up who you are, only to share your journey with me." Amina felt a surge of relief and trust. This was not the domineering figure she had feared. This was someone willing to walk beside her, to face the challenges of life as a partner, not a master. She nodded, her heart steadied by his words. "I am ready," she said. The ceremony began in the village square, under the wide blue sky. Simple decorations of flowers and cloths adorned the area, carried and arranged by villagers who had come to respect Amina and her courage. Children ran quietly, placing petals along the path, and elders stood with a mixture of pride and approval. The air was filled with a sense of harmony, a balance between tradition and the acknowledgement of Amina's strength. As she walked toward Faison, her steps were steady. Each step was a statement, a reflection of her courage, skill, and determination to maintain her independence even in the face of tradition. The villagers watched in silence, many moved by the sight of a young woman standing tall and confident, ready to shape her own destiny. When she reached Faison, he extended his hand with a gentle smile. Their eyes met, and in that moment the unspoken understanding between them was clear. This was not about power or control. This was about respect, partnership, and the courage to navigate life together while honoring one another's individuality. The elders spoke words of tradition, but there was a notable softness in their tone. They acknowledged the customs that had guided the village for generations, but they also recognized Amina's courage and choice. The ceremony became not only a celebration of union, but also a recognition of strength, respect, and personal agency. As Faison and Amina exchanged vows, the sincerity in their voices was evident. "I promise," Faison said, "to respect your courage, your dreams, and your independence. I will stand beside you, not above you, in every challenge and every joy that comes our way." Amina's voice was steady and firm as she replied, "I promise to walk with you, to trust, to communicate, and to face life with courage. I will not lose who I am, but I will share my journey with you, with respect and partnership." The villagers watched in awe, recognizing that this marriage was unlike any they had seen. It was not a surrender to tradition, nor a battle of wills, but a blending of courage, respect, and understanding. Amina had navigated the challenge with grace, and Faison had shown that strength was not in dominance, but in support and respect. After the ceremony, the villagers celebrated with simple music, food, and laughter. Children ran about with joy, and elders nodded with pride. Amina and Faison stood side by side, their hands intertwined, smiling at the harmony of the moment. It was a union built on courage, mutual respect, and the recognition that love and partnership could coexist with independence and strength. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the village, Amina and Faison walked together through the fields where she had first practiced archery. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and the faint sound of distant birds. It was a quiet, perfect moment of peace and reflection. Amina picked up her bow, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. She released an arrow into the sky, watching it soar gracefully before landing far in the distance. Faison watched her with admiration, his hands relaxed at his sides. "Even now," he said softly, "you carry your courage and skill into every moment." Amina smiled, feeling a sense of freedom and confidence she had never known before. "I always will," she said. "And I will carry it with me as we walk this path together." The journey ahead would still have challenges, but Amina no longer feared them. She had faced expectation, tradition, and uncertainty, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully aware of her own strength. She had chosen a path that honored both her independence and the reality of her circumstances, showing that courage and respect could guide even the most difficult decisions. Faison placed his hand gently over hers. "Together," he said, "we will face whatever comes, respecting each other, learning, and growing. Strength and courage brought us here, but love and partnership will guide us forward." Amina looked at him, feeling the truth in his words. She knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of her journey. Life would continue to test them, but she also knew that she had the power, courage, and determination to face anything alongside someone who respected and valued her for who she truly was. As night fell over the village, lanterns glowed softly, casting a warm light across the homes and fields. The villagers had returned to their houses, leaving the newlyweds alone in the quiet of the evening. Amina and Faison sat together under the stars, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet laughter. It was a moment of peace, a reward for the courage and perseverance that had brought them here. Amina reflected on everything that had happened, the arrow, the contest, the whispers, and the tension of expectation. She realized that every challenge had strengthened her, teaching her patience, strategy, and the value of self-respect. She had learned that courage was not only in facing physical trials, but also in making choices that honored her heart and her independence. Faison looked at her with a gentle smile. "You have taught me much," he said, "about courage, about patience, and about respect. I am grateful that we meet as equals, each bringing our own strength to this partnership." Amina nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude and hope. "And you have shown me that strength can also mean support, understanding, and partnership. Together, we can navigate anything." The night grew deeper, the sky filled with stars, and the village quieted into rest. Amina felt a sense of contentment she had never known. She had faced the impossible, navigated expectation, and chosen a path that honored both tradition and her independence. She had discovered that courage, respect, and trust could create a life that was both challenging and fulfilling. And as she sat beside Faison, feeling the warmth of his hand and the steadiness of his presence, she knew that the arrow that had started it all was more than a symbol of fate. It was a reminder of her courage, skill, and the strength of her spirit. It had led her to a future she had chosen herself, a life built on respect, partnership, and the power of making one's own decisions. For Amina, the journey was far from over, but she now faced it with confidence, knowing that courage, determination, and respect would guide every step. The arrow had been caught, tradition had been honored, and a new path had been forged, one that allowed her to walk forward with pride, independence, and a partner who truly valued her for who she was. And so, under the glow of the stars and the quiet village night, Amina and Faison began their life together, not bound by fear or control, but united by respect, courage, and the promise of facing the future as equals.